We were just talking before you folks got here about the fact that since really very little about Black Sails has come out, you have to sort of wing it a little bit when we talk to you. So with that in mind, could we maybe start by talking a little bit about your characters and maybe telling us a little bit more about them and metaphorically taking us by the hand?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I play Eleanor Guthrie, who is what they would have called defence, basically. So she takes in high goods and she sells them back to merchant ships. And for that reason, she's kind of the main economic and kind of political power on the island. And the pirates basically have to buy from her favour most of the time. And so in that way, she's a very determined young woman who is a very astute businesswoman. And it's an incredible role to kind of play, and I think with regards to history, it's amazing that a character like that I think would have existed, but maybe hadn't made it into the history books. So yeah, it's a fabulous character.
What about you, Tom?
I play Captain Flint, who's the captain of the Walrus. He's when we meet him in the first episode, he's historically been the biggest earner on the island. He has the most fearsome reputation. He's got the best crew, but he's hit on a fallow period where he hasn't been earning quite so much money, and his crew is becoming discontent. And there's a character who wants to become captain instead of him. He believes he's better and he could do better, and they want to get rid of Flint. So there's a feeling that he's, and at the time these crews were democratic. You voted a captain on and off the ship, and the only time a captain had absolute control was during battle. So there's a sense that Flint, he's this terrifying figure, but he's on the edge at the beginning of the series, and the crew could get rid of him, and he's trying to cling on to power.
If you guys don't ask questions,
well, for Toby, given your background in theater and stage, do you find that informed you, or did you find any similarities in how you would work as an actor, and how a pirate captain would have to control his crew?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think having a theatre background always helps because it's just part of my palette, as it were. But I think in terms of somebody who needs to, we're on an epic canvas here. They're not small characters. They're real human beings, but they're big personalities, and they also have to hold sway over these crews. So there is a certain theatrical element to what they are, but there's also the reverse side of that, where they're real human beings, and you have to give it a real sort of sense of these are real people, they're textured. So there is a kind of theatricality to it, but at the same time there's also the flip side of that. And also he's a very enigmatic character. We don't know really what's driving him, what the engine is. And that's revealed slowly throughout the series, and especially in the second series we're about to film. You get the whole backstory to Flint, why he is what he is, and what is driving him.
But don't you find, as an actor who works a lot in theater, a lot of actors I've spoken to over the years, they might have a sort of a backstory in their head that they keep, just so that they know how to play a character. And in television, would you do the same thing for Flint, for example, and play him a certain way until something comes up in the script and then maybe adjust it?
Well, I think that, part of what's fun about doing these long-running TV shows, hopefully long-running TV shows, is that you don't know where it's going. But the creators generally give you enough information about it to form a coherent character that is nuanced, that is real, and you have to work with that material. But like real life, we all change, and things are thrown at us. Events happen that actually kick us into some other part of our life, and we other parts of us are inflected, or whatever. So I think I'm starting off from this basis. I don't know where he's going to go. I look forward to finding out, and I'm all for changing as it goes along. and it being something that is plastic rather than something that's stuff.
I think for me, I had to make some choices early on about her backstory in order to kind of, have that fullness when you're approaching scenes and be able to kind of emotionally prep yourself for it. And yes, as the season goes on and you find out more and more details, subtle things about your story have to change. And they become richer and you become more informed as you go into every single scene. So as much as you can prep for a role, I think one of the most amazing things about being an episode of TV and being on a series like this is kind of like living, that a character will change and evolve and you don't know where they're going to go and you don't know how far they will have to kind of, how ruthless they will have to become to survive. So it's an incredible experience to kind of learn those journeys and learn with the character.
You mentioned that you had to create the background song yourself for the character, and that you'd like to think she did exist in history. Were there any historical influences that you researched for this role?
Yeah, there were. They weren't relating necessarily to the Caribbean. I looked at characters like Grace O'Malley, who was an Irish pirate and aristocrat, and kind of adapted, a few of those historical figures in order to understand. But I think my research kind of had to get a lot wider and kind of had to be a lot more centred on the context of being in the Caribbean. And I think one of the most interesting things that I learned was that it's kind of like a war situation. Is that there are long periods of time where crews are off, hunting treasure. So and in that way, the society, the population of the island is predominantly female. So the jobs that need to be done on the island, the way in which the island has to be run economically, for example, still has to happen. So the people that she has to trade with in order to provide food and resources for the pirates when they come back into town, that still has to happen. So the fact that we're presenting a female character who would have done that, who didn't make it into the history books is amazing.
I was talking at the panel last night that there were no parrots and peg legs going on like this.
Yeah.
They're kind of non-campy sort of pirates. How are you guys kind of dimensionalizing this and bringing it to life to make sure people know it's not going to be all kind of R's and skeletons running around?
Well, I think that's part of the fun of this, and what's really exciting about this series is that we are taking something that's such a cliche-ridden, story and world, and we're creating something that is real, and it's in a historical context that is real. So, it's such a fascinating period. You have slavery, you have America as a colony, that on the horizon there's the American War of Independence coming, French Revolution, your Age of Enlightenment. This is all happening at the same time. Rather than just these mythological worlds where pirates exist, just sort of like on their own. It just so happens that they're walking around in 18th century costumes. But it's just a totally fantastical world. Whereas this has a place in time, and that there's a sense of a pragmatic sense of these guys are there earning a living. And it's a really dangerous world in which they exist. It's not glamorized. And they have to think about what they're going to do. They're always living on the edge of survival. They're having to survive, and they're doing this because they have to survive. And I think that it creates a totally different world. And I think the people who will come to this expecting the mythological world, but what they'll get is so much more entertaining and so much more interesting. Really.
The more kind of research I did, I just realised how rich all of those storylines are, and then talking to John and being like, I found this out, and is that going to be working into the story at some point, or? And I think that John being the mastermind of trying to condense all of these different historical factors in a story that is intelligible and gritty and gripping is an incredible feat. And I think as we go on and we read more and more scripts, and you suddenly realise that it's a massive job to be able to kind of get these storylines all together and weave them through in a way that
create this world. I mean, what I
Yeah.
loved about what John said the other day as well was that really at the end of the day, what this is like an office situation
Yeah.
where these guys go to work and they work on the ship and they all have relationships that are totally political relationships that are totally reflect a modern society and modern environments that we work in,
Yeah.
which gives it a real sort of irony and a sense of, at times, a sense of lightness. You know, they all kind of rubbing along together, and some of them don't get on, some of them don't like the other person, and there's it really gives you a sense of like these are real people in a
Yeah.
real situation, rather than some fantastic.
But is there a line that you have to sort of tread where, on the one hand, you want the characters to be relatable, your character to be relatable, specifically Toby, but on the other hand, the pirates. You know, I mean, these are not
But that's
nice guys.
it's a fun line to walk,
Right.
because on the way you make them personal, you go, oh, I can't relate to this guy, he's sort of like me, and then the next minute you're punching somebody to death, and they're going, oh, I don't know what you're doing now, this is terrifying, and that's a really fun line for us to play as actors, but I think also for audience members, they'll be sucked into this world, and they'll like these characters, they'll relate with them, and then they do terrible things, which makes it hard for you to you know, and you're constantly having to adjust your point of view on these people, but yet we create a world in which they understand also the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, and that gives them a conflict, and that's the great thing about these long-running shows now. We're in the heyday of TV, and we can create these very nuanced, complex stories that don't patronize audiences, that don't use the shorthand of film. They're not. We can really kind of create complex adult stories for
I
audiences.
think that's what's really liberating about playing characters that have so many layers to them, and that each layer in some way has to be exposed at some point in order for an audience to really understand this person and identify with them. And I think, you know, all of our characters are vulnerable at points, all of our characters are ruthless, all of our characters are entertaining at points, and I think that's the most incredible opportunity. We've had a lot of fun doing it.